Good day, everybody. My dear student of third level, I am Dr. Na'im Fahim. I hope you all safe and healthy. This is our 8th lecture in tax accounting principles. Our lecture today is about tax on natural persons, tax on revenues of non-commercial professions, vocational activities. Learning objectives. After completing this session, you will be able to identifying the nature of revenues relating to the professional and the non-commercial activity and the conditions for living tax, compute the taxable revenue and the deductible costs to reach the net taxable revenue, finally describe the exemptions and nature of revenues. The tax on vocational or non-commercial activities is levied on based on revenues resulted from work which is performed by a person for his own account and on his own responsibility and under his supervision. Examples of these revenues are realized by accountants, lawyers, physicians and doctors, engineers, who practice their professions through their own offices, depending especially on their technical experience, scientific and intellectual skills, not on their tools or instruments. These revenues, as we see, are different from salaries and the like, which is resulted from work done or performed by a person for the account of another person, employer, and under the supervision and control of this employer. The conditions for living tax. To be subject to this type of tax, revenues must have the following conditions. Number 1, independent practice of the profession. That means practice the profession for his own account, not for account of another one. Number 2, actual practice of the profession. That means an accountant has to open an office to practice actually his vocation. Number 3, practice the profession in a usual manner with the intention of earning. Intention of profit is very important to provision to be subject to tax. So the charity activities and the non-for-profit organizations are not subject to tax. Number 4, practice the profession in Egypt or abroad, provided that Egypt is the main center for practicing. Of the tax base. Tax base means the net revenues of the net income of the taxpayer. And as we know, net revenues equals to total revenues less or minus deductible costs. So we will discuss the two parties. Regarding total revenues included in the taxable base shall be determined annually on the basis of net revenues during the preceding year. These revenues include the following: all revenues of practicing the profession, any proceeds from the disposal of any professional assets, and we call this type of revenues capital gains. Revenues received by intellectual property rights holder from selling or using their rights. Revenues resulting from the transfer of expertise. Any revenue resulting from the liquidation or receipts from the closure of the office. We see the net revenues is those revenues from various operations according to the provisions of this law, after deducting all costs and expenses necessary for carrying out the profession, including asset depreciation. The following costs are deductible. Number 1. Registration fees, annual subscription, and professional practice fees. 2. Taxes paid by the taxpayer for the practice of the profession other than the tax paid in accordance with this law. Number 3. Amounts paid by the taxpayer to his syndicate in accordance with its pension system. Number 4. Life and health insurance premiums paid by the taxpayer in his own favor or in favor of his wife and minor children, provided that the total amount deducted from the taxable revenue for items 3 and 4 can't exceed 3,000 Egyptian pound per annum. Article 34 of the tax law stated that donations to the government, local administrative units, public legal persons may be deducted from net revenues, provided that the amount deducted doesn't exceed the net annual revenue. Also, donation and assistance granted to recognized Egyptian non-governmental organizations, educational institutions, and hospitals that are subject to the supervision of the government, as well as Egyptian scientific research institutions, but not more than 10% of the annual net. Article 35 stated that from the taxpayer's total revenue, all costs and expenses necessary to earn the revenue may be deducted based on the proper accounts supported with related documents. However, in case no proper account are maintained, the deduction will be limited to 10%. According to Article 36 of the tax law, the following revenue are exempted from tax. Revenues of editing and translating books and religious, scientific, cultural, and literary articles, except for proceeds from the sale of printed work or translation with a view to producing it in an audio or visual format. Revenues received by teaching staff at universities and institutes for their books and teaching notes authored for distribution among students according to the regulations and the prices set by the universities and institutes. Revenues of members of the formative artists syndicate pursuing the production of photography, sculpture, and engraving artist work. Revenues of self-employed professionals registered as members of their professional syndicates in their fields of specialization, but only for 3 years from the date of practice. They shall not be liable to tax until the beginning of the month following the lapse of the aforementioned exemption period, added to which is the training period required by the profession's practice law, public service period, military service, or reserve service period if it is subsequent to the date of the practice commencing. The period of the exemption will be limited to 1 year for whoever practices the profession for the first time if 15 years have elapsed since graduation.